Janidu. So a very good evening to everyone who have joined us today. This is in fact the third session in our series of webinars that we've organized specifically targeting cyber security professionals and those who aspire to become CISOs. Cybersecurity is now so important, and it's very important to stay up to date, stay abreast of the latest developments taking place. So in our first webinar, we learned about the evolving role of the CISO. In the second webinar, we touched on how as CISOs, we can better communicate the requirements uh, to how to convert technology risks to a business risk and relate to directors and convince them about in investing in cybersecurity in their organizations. And now today, Janidu, we have invited Janidu, a top cybersecurity professional who began his career, I believe, in PricewaterhouseCoopers, rising up the ranks from assistant manager to senior manager for almost a decade.
Correct.
Then, yeah, almost a decade, and that's a very long time in assurance and in advisory, technology consulting. And thereafter, he joined Virtusa, heading a cybersecurity function, and then thereon moved to the nation's trust bank, where he headed the CISO function. And today, Janidhi, you're the CISO of HSBC, Sri Lanka, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah. And having said that, I would like to invite Janidhu to make his presentation, which will be for about 45 minutes. And then we will have a 15-minute Q&A and wrap it up by 7 p.m. So with that very short, brief introduction, I would like to invite Janidhu to make his presentation. His presentation, of course, will be made available to you, to all those who have registered today or tomorrow. So, Janidhu, you may now commence your presentation.
All right. Thanks, Ashane, for that warm welcome, and good evening, everyone. So while I was researching on this topic on, what actually keeps up a CISO up at night, so I was looking at the traditional threats. I'm sure that you and I are all very familiar with ransomware, phishing, right? Misconfigurations, insider threat. So there are, when you look at threats, the whole threat landscape is countless, right? There are, day in, day out, there are, threats that are getting added on to our sort of landscape, right? But when I really look deep at a CISO or at a senior cybersecurity, from a governance perspective, while there can be so many external threats, what really worries me, are the operational level threats or exposures that an organization can face. So I'll dive deep into what these operational threats are. But while things like ransomware and AI-led attack vectors keep on increasing, the having your house in order and sometimes doing the mundane things correct, it builds the true resilience in an organization. So I think that's the sort of presentation and the thought process that I had while I was developing this. So I want to sort of take you through the agenda. So there's few areas. One is to give an industry and a world view on data breaches and why, as a CISO or anyone in cybersecurity, why are we so worried, right? And to also sort of walk through a well-known breach, the Uber breach, which was in 2022, to sort of understand what can we actually learn from them. And then to actually, dive into the top 10 operational threats. Again, operational threats themselves, there are countless number of threats, but I have picked tend to discuss. We can definitely discuss more during the Q&A as well. And then finally, what can you do to sort of or to take back from this presentation as action items in your own individual organizations? What can you do to build a more resilient organization? So this cost of a data breach is an IBM report that gets published every year. It is a very insightful report and one of my favorite reads as a CISO every year. I look forward for this because this gives a very good perspective on what is the threat landscape and why are we so worried. So the if you look at some high level numbers here, right, the globally the average cost of a data breach is around almost $5 million, right? And from a senior management or board perspective, the average cost saving, if you are doing the right things, having the right tools and processes, is over $2 million, right? And the third point is the shadow data, right? So this is something new that we are looking in the industry. Is basically we had shadow IT, now we have shadow data, is where the public or the end users are uploading a lot of information into chat GPT and other large language models, which actually are not very well controlled, right? And the average time to detect and contain an incident, it's far too long, right? Because when an incident happens, the that dwell time plus the actual remediation and to really contain it, it is a long time. So here it's around almost 300 days. uh, and these are global numbers that I put. I will not go into them individually, but as you can see, the healthcare sector globally is affected largely, but then right behind it is the financial sector and the other industries, right? So I think from a senior perspective, from a board perspective, the need for all of this, to identify and have proper controls, it's now self-explanatory. So on this report, there's two interesting graphs that I wanted to share with you guys. So on the left-hand side is basically the attack vectors, right? How and when an attack happens, from where do they actually get in? So if you look at it, the most common and the most expensive attacks are the most basic ones, right? The phishing and stolen and compromised credentials, right? Which we have been talking for a long time, and that remains, true to this date. And if you look at on the other side, business email compromise and even accidental data leakage, zero-day vulnerabilities, all of that play a part. But phishing and stolen, is standing out. And on the right-hand side, basically, what you're seeing is some of the key actions that if you have done would actually reduce the cost of a breach, right? So one of the things personally that I have done, in the past is I actually go through this list and I actually, have a sort of a checklist to say, am I covering these areas, right? It's a good start. Uh, and interestingly, I have also highlighted in red some areas. Basically, those are, as per the report, the top things that people have done after that they have breached, right? So the horse has left the stable, right? After they breach, these are the main areas that they have focused on. So I think as security professionals and risk professionals, our duty and job is to ensure that these controls are implemented and sort of addressed before anything happens. So again, this is a sort of a chaser into the slide deck. I'm not going to go in detail into these areas, but again, to reiterate my point, if you really look at it, employee training, these are very basic things, right? So the proper training is driving the most when it comes to reducing a cost of a breach, right, globally. And then followed by things like AI and good security controls plus incident response and planning. So Moving on, these are again few incidents that I picked up that have happened during the last couple of years. Again, uh, some you might know. So one of the ones that I wanted to highlight is this Move It breach, right? That is a file transfer software that has been used by many organizations, and when they found this vulnerability, a large number of organizations across the world was affected, right? So again, when you look at that root cause there, right? So when you are over dependent on your vendors, right? And in your supply chain, so supply chain security, and how comfortable with, are you with your supply chain is a good sort of a starting point when you're thinking about this breach. Uh, so there are other countless sort of uh, root causes that we can sort of extract out of this, but I will move on in the interest of time. I will just to dwell on the Uber breach. I'm sure a lot of y'all have already heard about it because this was few years back. But just to summarize, right? In Uber, this what actually happened was an attacker stole a third party credentials, right? A third party vendor's credentials. And he sort of initiated an MFA fatigue attack, right? So what really happened was, so they have actually configured MFA, right? So even though the credentials were compromised, when he was trying to log into this account, MFA request would go into the actual third party user's mobile phone, right? So they kept on sending these mobile requests, right? MFA requests, hundreds of them. And then at one point, they gave him a call and pretended like they were calling from Uber support and said, "Hey, look, we are calling from Uber support. We see that you're having a bit of a difficulty. There's a bit of a system issue, and you're getting a lot of MFA requests. Please accept the next one, and this issue will be solved." Right? So because he was thought that this was a genuine phone conversation, he actually accepted the that next MFA request, right? So through that, they actually gained access into the Uber network, right? Once they were in the network, uh, because there were not much of segmentation done, they will actually be able to, get into a file server which actually had hard-coded credentials or secrets to their PAM, right? Privilege access system. So using those credentials, they were able to access so many other systems, including their code repositories, right, of Uber. So if you, in this context, right, if you look at it, what are the things that went wrong, right? If you look at the first part, right, credential compromise. So uh, in an organization, we target phishing training simulations to our internal staff, right? But do we extend that to third parties? Do we know, or at least do we know, even if a third party is conducting training on things like this, right? Then if you look at dark web monitoring, right? So if it's a compromised credential that is in the dark web, ideally, if you have processes around it, you would have still picked up these credentials and gotten rid of them, right? Compromised credentials. So that didn't happen, right? And then when it comes to the MFA fatigue, there was no rate limiting done, right? And again, there was no awareness or training on this, phishing type of attacks as well, where you can get scammed through your telephone line. Uh, okay, fine. So those are two operational, gaps that I see, right? And then once they did move in at a network level, it was not properly segmented, right? So this allowed the attacker to actually move laterally into sensitive areas of the network, right? And then once he was in, as I said, he found hard-coded secrets, again, which should not be there, right? We all know how passwords and secrets needs to be managed, right? There has to be policies, procedures around them to ensure that they are not, stored in, plain text, right? And then on top of it, because while all of this is happening, their detection systems were also was not able to pick up any of these sequence of events that were happening. So this is a bit of a intro into why some of these internal gaps are very critical when it comes to overall security. So so with that, I will move on to the main crux of my sort of presentation. So so as the presentation, there was 10 threats. So I handpicked 10, which I wanted to sort of discuss and share with you all. So so these are the 10. I'll go through one by one, right? So I think the main focus is, where do and how do we sort of find the operational weaknesses, right? So the number one threat, right, that I have personally sort of will always vouch for is, you can't protect what you don't know, right? And in most large organizations, there is always a concern on the completeness of your assets, right? If a CISO or a security personnel, right, doesn't know the entire landscape, right, it is very difficult to protect it, right? So one of the main threats that I see is unknown IT assets and shadow IT, right? So shadow IT is basically where end users are doing IT operations without informing IT, right? So they will use web-based applications over the internet to do some of these day-to-day work which IT will not have control of. So that is basically shadow IT. So I think having complete asset inventories, right? So I have actually listed down a few questions uh, and not to ask yourself, right? Do you have updated asset inventories? Do you know all your servers, right? Do you know all your endpoints, right? Uh, if there is a new server added into the system, right, to your environment, do you know it, right? Is there a mechanism to identify such a change, right? Is there a central way of managing your assets, right? Or are you all still sort of using an Excel file to manage assets, right? If that is so, how do you ensure that, the accuracy of those Excel files, right? Uh, you know, in real life or in my personal experience, we once looked at an asset inventory, and once we did the review, it was 400 IT assets that once we did the review, we jumped into, I think, 800 or 900 assets, right? So 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 these can't be one-time exercises. And things like asset inventory, it is always good to have an automated way of managing your IT assets, right? And then your public facing assets, right? How much of a grasp do you have? Do you know your complete public facing asset list? uh, because if you look at a lot of these threats that have materialized, is where people have missed on assets, some of assets, and they have failed to protect it, right? So they are out in the open, they don't have the right controls, and then therefore we get compromised. So so as best practices, I think you need to sort of have continuous asset discovery, attack surface management, right? ASM platforms, and to also have an inventory of your cloud assets, right? And I have also mentioned ownership and accountability because sometimes this is a major concern in some organizations, right? Because in some organizations, this might even be mentioned as a security responsibility, right? Which isn't, right? It's part of IT. IT needs to ensure that the IT asset inventories are up to date, and not having that, I think, is a key risk to any organization. uh, Second threat I want to discuss is poor metrics and visibility, right? So now imagine when you're in a large organization, right? There are a lot of controls that are already implemented, right? But then how do you keep track of these controls, and how do you know whether these controls are effective, right? Now, for example, right? Let's say your EDR or antivirus, right? Now, when if we go and talk to the IT, right, they will say, yes, all endpoints are implemented with EDR, right? But now, how do you verify this, right? What is the assurance that you have on this statement? So this is where you need to sort of have the right metrics in place, right? And the right metric owners to take accountability for some of these controls, right? So that if you don't have that, then basically again what's happening is you're flying blind, right? You assume that things are working, right? So having good metrics and metrics that can actually be communicated to the leadership, right? So if you're I'm from a bank, and banks are quite regulated. So there is a lot of interaction with the with risk and with the board and the leadership. So as part of my CISO duties, I have a dashboard which I go and sort of present at the to my senior management and to the board, right? Saying that these are the key controls that and this is the current state. So having those right metrics implemented is a very critical thing when it comes to having the right security controls, right? And a good place to start, I would say, is the NIST framework, right? It is a big framework, but what you can do is you can pick, the metrics that you want to really, really drive, right? Now, for example, phishing, right? Since that is one of the main, risk factors in an organization, phishing should be a key control or a key metric that should be presented, right? So just like that, you can pick and choose some of the key metrics and to ensure that you have a robust mechanism of tracking the effectiveness of security. So that is the second threat if you don't have that visibility. Uh, Third thread that I want to talk about is on weak incident response, right? I think we can all agree that the world has moved from, saying that we can prevent everything, right? There was a stage like that maybe about 10 years ago where we were very focused on prevention, right? Saying that, we do these controls, we'll have firewalls, WAFs, this, that, and then, yeah, we are secure, right? Now we have come to a stage, right? uh, Saying that, look, no matter whatever we do invest, there is and will be a chance that we will be breached, right? So, because that is how sophisticated the threat landscape is, right? And then, so what now management has to sort of understand is how quickly can we detect if there is a ongoing breach or a breach attempt, right? How quickly can we detect and how quickly can we respond, right? So therefore, if I don't have that comfort knowing that if there is something that will go, that there are established processes to kick in to actually mitigate or to control an incident, right? That is a key area that I will not be able to sleep at night if proper incident response is not there, right? So I think it's not only the plan, you have to ensure that you do run good simulation tests, right? Not for the sake of compliance, not just a checkbox type of incident response, but you do run realistic scenarios and you get your management also sort of involved, right? So that there is leadership buy-in as well. So I think that is very important. And I think one other thing in incident response that I think a lot of organizations are doing, locally and worldwide, is to have a incident response retainer, where you tie up with good forensic and sorry cyber teams to help you navigate a incident if that happens, right? And to also have cyber insurance as well, right? So moving on, phishing awareness gaps, right? I think as we discussed earlier, phishing, is continuing to be one of the biggest initial attack vectors and threats to the organization, right? A lot of the attacks that we see worldwide are starting from phishing, right? Even if you look at some of the local attacks that have happened, which have been on the news, right, in the recent past, phishing plays a big role in, and some other control lapses as well. But phishing also does play a role in some of these incidents, right? So the key questions to ask is, are you having a monotonous phishing, awareness training, right? Or are you actually tracking the susceptibility rate, right? So that's how phishing needs to be done, right? You need to ensure that it's not about just saying, okay, I have, sent, 1,000 emails to all my staff on phishing, right? It's about the click rate. It's about who are the repeat offenders. What do you do with repeat offenders, right? Uh, so so that's sort of the phishing. There has to be sort of a path. In one of my previous organizations, you know, we were so serious. Once you do the awareness, if you continue to fail more than 3 or 4 times, some of your accesses gets revoked until you do a proper training. There is repercussions for continuously failing some of these trainings as well, right? So those have to be sort of implemented from a remediation point of view. You need to sort of implement a robust sort of phishing program, as well as you have to also ensure that these phishing trainings are targeted, right? Because with the introduction of AI and all of these deep fakes and all of that is going on. So what you have to understand is phishing is now very, very targeted, right? So then you have to assess, is my phishing program, right? First of all, you need to start if you're not doing phishing, right? If you are doing phishing, is my program strong and matured enough to cover these, upcoming threats, right? So that is a key threat again, if not addressed properly. Uh, Moving on, privilege creep is basically on identity and access management, right? So, and privilege access management. Uh, if an organization does not have the right privilege access management and controls, again, it is one of those threats that is getting exploited, or across so many incidents that we have seen, right? So having proper privilege access management system, and also defining, right, who need to have access, right? These are things that we can dive very deep into. For the interest in time, I will keep it short. Again, this itself can be a topic. So if you have a privilege account, you have MFA configured to it, right? Are you monitoring that privilege account, right? uh, if a privilege account is provisioned, and if he has access, does he have just in time access, right? So you have to give access only for the period required, right? So these are few things. If you implement correctly, a lot of these large external threats that we hear about, you can be quite safe, right? Because there are layers and layers of controls that we implement. So then the other component, I think, again, is configuration drift. Is basically nothing but configuration management, right? Uh, Again, we have secure configuration baselines, right? CIS benchmarks that we do, right? If you are a IT organization, they will typically have these. But then from a security governance point of view, are you confident to say that, all the servers or production servers, right, have have been hardened, right, to the right baseline, then is there a way for you to validate, right, if they are not? So, so these are few questions I think you need to ask yourself, because if you have server management, endpoint management solutions, you can also sort of have dashboards around your posture as well, on your hardening posture, right? But when you don't have that, right, and you have hundreds and hundreds of servers, right, how comfortable are you to say that, look, these have been configured securely, right? Then if you talk about an endpoint, right, do we have a secure image for our endpoint, right? Or we just get it from the vendor and, just give it to the user, right? So these are some of those practices that you need to enforce to, have these basic controls in place, right? A very famous problem, I'm sure, regardless of the size of the organization. I think patch management and patch delays, are notoriously, it's there, right? Because especially if you're on Windows platforms, there are countless patches that you need to do. So again, while we do acknowledge, but when it's a high critical patch, what is the process around it, right? Because if it's a patch, that means there is an exploit, right? It is a vulnerability, right? So then, how do you prioritize as a security organization, right? Sometimes when you run a VA scan, there can be thousands or if not even 100,000 vulnerabilities that come up, right? Then, and if you now go to IT and say you fix them all of this, everybody will go mad, right? So then, how do we ensure that we bring in threat intel into this picture, right? How do we identify vulnerabilities which are exploited in the wild, right, which are actively being exploited, right? So that sort of, if you have tools and mechanisms to identify that, then you can prioritize your patching process, right, to first of all identify the high critical, because even if it's a critical vulnerability, sometimes it might not be exploited very commonly, right? There might not be many exploits. So, but whereas there can be some other vulnerabilities which are very commonly exploited across, right? So then you need to be aware of those and to focus your priority on those areas, right? Uh, then moving on to unmanaged AI adoption, I think we are all guilty of it. We all use AI to make our lives a little bit easier. But in an organization, so as a security team, you can't also, if you block everything, you will be named the team that is sort of blocking uh, basically the creativity, right? And the enhancements of the organization, right? So but also you can't have all of these LLM models where people can freely access and there are APIs that are getting connected, because you have no idea what type of data is getting sort of pushed into. So this is actually a real big threat and a risk that we are seeing across the board. And if you look at it, I think recently there was an incident also. It was a Samsung uh, developer who had submitted some Samsung code into a LLM, right? And then then only they figured out it was proprietary information, right? So then while we shouldn't stifle innovation and growth in an organization, how do you do that securely, right? So do you have a AI policy, right, in the organization, right? Because as security professionals, I'm sure business should be now coming to you guys and saying, look, there is this AI model, I want to use this type of activities to fine tune my operation. So then you should have key controls in place, like what are the approved usage, what are the use cases, right? How do you handle data? What is prohibited, what is not, right? Then how do you use this ethically, right? So if you are taking data, is it going to give a biased opinion? So things like that needs to be really considered. So while AI is here to stay, I think as security professionals, we need to have controls around it, and also policies and procedures as well on how do we govern use of AI in the organization. Uh, Next threat, as a senior executive or a CISO, right, is uh, what if I don't have executive buy-in, right? What if the business leaders are not really cared about security, right? They say, look, I want to invest my time and my money and my effort into growing the business, right? Security, it has been there, nothing has happened so far, right? So why do we need to do anything, right? So, if you have a leadership that is not understanding of the cyber risk and the need for cyber controls, that is a fundamental area that will not let you sleep, right? Because you need to have the buy-in from the management to have, resources, support, budgets to implement a lot of these things to control cybersecurity threats, right? So, not having that support, I think for a CISO is a major threat from a governance perspective. So I think my previous, as Ashen said, on the previous two sessions, I am sure both Sujit and Suresh must have covered the importance of this. So again, I'll not dwell into it, but I think you need to take a risk-based approach into sort of explaining to your senior management on why some of these controls are necessary, and it is good for the business as well. Uh, and my final threat, I think, on the top 10 is the lack of oversight, right? Now, second and third line, because when it comes to security, it's a common area that people will assume it's an IT problem or it's a security problem, right? That's not the case, right? Cybersecurity is everybody's problem, right? And when you come to an organization, having the second line, which is risk, and the third line, which is audit, right? Having those functions do their work to support our mission is very critical, right? Because uh, in an organization, you have three lines of defense, right? Which is the world-renowned sort of approach to this. So IT and security generally sits in the first line. So the second line is risk, to assess, what are the risks around cyber, what are the risks around IT, right? And audit is to keep all of us honest, right? They do very independent checks on all of this. So how much do you engage with these teams, right? So if there is no engagement, and this, if you have been left aside saying that, look, we don't really care, this is not a business problem, this is a risk, this doesn't have to be discussed in a risk forum, or this is not really audit's problem, right? That is again a very big red flag for a CISO if that is the case. So having the right structure and the second and third line inputs is very, very crucial for cybersecurity to sort of properly be governed within an organization. So, uh, okay, I got only 6 more minutes. So these were basically the top 10, threats, the operational threats. So then, what can we do about it, right? So so again, I just want to leave with you guys five areas, basically starting with cybersecurity ownership and accountability, right? You have to ensure that this is a risk that is owned across the board, right? It is not an IT problem. It is not only a CISO problem. It is a problem across the organization, right? So this is a very crucial element of a very successful cyber operation, is to ensure that you have the right ownership and accountability built in within the organization. So I will not go into all of these key actions one by one, simply because we are sharing the slide deck also with you guys. So second one is to be metric driven, right? So what you can't measure, you can't improve, right? That is the key message. So to ensure that you have a cybersecurity program which is metric driven, and all the key risks, you have the right KPIs and KRIs implemented to measure and to improve your cybersecurity posture. Uh, Third one, control, validation, and testing, right? So now, in most cases, what will happen is we will go through an implementation, right? For example, let's say a DLP, right? You get a vendor, the vendor will come, they will do some use cases, they will say, okay, done, implemented, right? But then where does this control, validation, and testing come from, right? So uh, now, if you look at in large organizations, there are tools which we call, breach simulation tools or breach and attack simulation tools, where you can actually program tests to be run on a periodic basis, right? To In one of my previous organizations, one of the simulation tools. So we had different types of data configured that will be exfiltrated uh, through different channels, right? And then it will test whether our controls are strong enough to detect it, prevent it, or does it just completely let it go, right? So having either automated or manual control validation is very important, right? So this is where your red teaming, your purple teaming exercises come in to keep on validating your controls, and you are not just assuming, okay, I asked IT said okay, this is okay. That is sort of not the way to go. And number four is zero trust as a strategic framework. Uh, Again, this is not a solution or a product that I want to leave with you guys, right? It is about the zero trust principles and how you can achieve them, right? So zero trust uh, talks about three elements. One is, never trust, always verify, right? Least privilege access and assume breach, right? Never trust, always verify is you continuously verify a user, right? Not only at one level, the user at different stages of his journey gets verified, right? Uh, then least privilege access is quite straightforward, is use access management and ensuring that only the right person will have the right access to the information, right? And assume breach is basically you are under the assumption that you are already hacked, right? If you know that, what would you do differently, right? So one of the main components of assume breach is microsegmentation, right? So that you segment your network so that even if something happens, you're controlling that blast radius, right? So uh, for people who have not had a look at it, I think zero trust is a good element because it will always overlap with any other framework, right? It doesn't have to be a new implementation per se. It can always overlap because it talks about very basic principles. And finally, as a CISO or a senior, security person, you need to be very, very mindful of what do you want to protect, right? Because in an organization, you can't protect everything, right? You have to be very upfront about it. So, but you need to have mechanisms and processes to identify what is business critical, right? What are my non-negotiables? And for those information and data, you put your full effort. So I think that is the last sort of point that I want to leave with on protecting data. Yeah, so I think I've discussed the this key takeaways. So so keep an eye on the operational threats that we sort of discuss, because threats will always be, additional threats will be coming, but having your operational controls strong will always ensure that, whatever comes new, you are still having the right controls in place, right? And have visibility. You really can't protect if you don't know, you know uh, that you have it. So that is very, very vital to have the right visibility. Then it's very important to have the right metrics, that metrics are not only for show, right? It is to for you to do actionable, to take actionable intel and to do actionable items, right? So have the right metrics, and then sort of take a zero trust approach, and then prioritize all of this, because it's a large chunk of area to cover. So it's very important to pick and choose your battles and to prioritize. All right, thank you so much. I think this is the end of my presentation. Happy
Thank you.
to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very informative, a lot of information, very succinctly put. And I'm sure most of our participants would have got a very good idea about the top risks, cyber risks, and how to put in place the required safeguards to prevent any unnecessary attacks. So I would like to invite the audience, anyone who has joined us today, to use the Q&A option or the chat box to post any questions to our presenter, Janidu. Um, so we will definitely send you a copy of the slide deck. You will receive that. I saw a few questions. Um, that will be done. Um, so let us give a few minutes. So until then, Janidu, you know, I think you also mentioned the senior leadership team plays a very important role in cybersecurity. So in your experience, past experience, how can you get the senior team, management team more engaged, or how do you get their buy-in, as it were, uh, in terms of investing in the required cybersecurity tools
I think
and all that?
the uh, my take is, I think it's also a language game, right?
Yeah,
It is to speak in their language. So
right.
if you go and talk about firewalls and IPS, IDS or encryption, you will lose them, from the start. So I think
Yeah.
you need to use the risk language, right?
Mm,
And sort of take business scenarios, that they can understand, and highlight the risk. If these controls are not in place, what is the possible risk, that you have to speak their language, right? That is one of the main things that you need to do. So I think that is one of the CISO's role also, right? You have to have a bridge between the technical team and the non-technical team, right? So you have to sort of manage that, to speak their language, to help them understand why these are important. And yeah.
yes. So communication plays a very important role, and you should be able to have good negotiation skills, convincing skills as well, I suppose. So another question: what is the biggest human factor, or challenge or behavioral challenge you kind of faced in the various organizations that you perhaps worked in or consulted in mitigating cyber risks? From a human angle, I think the humans, you can't have a patch for human stupidity. So what is your take on it? What is the biggest human behavioral challenge that you kind of saw
Yeah,
over?
I think that age-old saying that humans are the weakest link is
Mm,
stands through right throughout, right? And it will, I don't think it will change by organization either, right? So, but what is actually setting that apart is how strong your training and awareness is, right?
right.
So Now, there are organizations who do some of these areas for compliance sake, right? So,
Right.
the regulator has said, do a annual awareness session. So, you send out something and say, okay, it's a tick in the box, I have done, right? But then there are also organizations which do training where you actually gauge the understanding of the user as well, right? And I think I also uh, and also how serious you take it, right? I can give you one example of one of my organizations. The annual security training, was it's a mandatory training. You have to do it. It's an e-learner. You have to do it, and we had a director from USA who has not done it, right? So, the way that we have defined the control is you will get 3 or 4 reminders. After the fifth reminder, you lose access to your system, right?
Right.
Right? It doesn't matter if you're the CEO, it doesn't matter if you're a director, right? A control is a control, right? So that's the tone that we have set as well. So I actually got a call. I still remember at around 10 o'clock in the night. This guy was very furious why he can't, access the system. So I just very calmly said, look, there is a remediation link. You click that, you do your training, your access will come. There is nothing else that I can do, right? So, having that, that seriousness, right, is
Mhm.
also very important to drive that culture. Because when you have that culture, it it grows on you, right? Just one more example, maybe if I can share, right? Now, we are all guilty of sharing information on WhatsApp, right? It doesn't matter if you're a banking or non-banking, right? Finally, while there are countless, or not countless, 1 or 2 approved mechanisms that your organization recommended, but somewhere down the line, you will, drift this conversation into WhatsApp, and you might also, end up even, communicating with a client or getting your client to share some data, like their NIC or their KYC documents on WhatsApp, right? So now this is a behavioral thing, right? You can't really control this. So in instances like that, you as an organization, you also have to take very very drastic or at least very strict steps, right? So in one of my organizations, uh, we track the internal communications to see is there any notion of people using WhatsApp, right? Where sometimes what they'll say is, I'll share your password on WhatsApp,
Yeah.
right? So we pick up on those and then we actually investigate. So because you have to make people accountable, and then once that happens, that culture also sorts of grows in. So I think that awareness piece, you can't do it bottom up, right? It has to be top down, where from your CEO and your executive management, you're very serious on this.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's not just about creating awareness, but enforcement also plays a very important role. So, talking about using WhatsApp and all that, there's a question here. What is your approach towards addressing privacy risk? Is it the duty of the data protection officer or the CISO?
Yeah, so again, very interesting question, right? It's a good question, very interesting question. So in large organizations, these roles are separate, right? It is it is separate because some of the outcomes that are to be achieved and some of the scope when it comes to these implementations are different, right?
Yeah.
But it is also sometimes a practice of small organizations, sometimes during that 1 or 2 years of implementation, right? Because when you're implementing this whole privacy journey, there are a lot of technical components as well, right? So there are instances where the CISO will double head the implementation phase, but once that is done, it will move out of his scope into a business function.
Right.
So, but the ideal state is to have these two separate, because I think the
Separate.
outcomes are quite different. Yeah.
Yes. We also have another understanding the IT risk landscape uh, and understanding the IT universe. What steps can we use? I suppose the IT universe consists of all auditable units, so assets, IT assets that need to be audited, be it hardware, software, and the IT risk. It's about carrying out a cyber risk assessment. So, what are your thoughts if you like to elaborate?
Yeah, so again, it's easier said than done. Again,
Mm,
this whole landscape, but you have to start with your inventories, right? Uh, to identify. So when you are doing a risk assessment, sometimes you might not be doing a risk assessment per individual asset, right?
yeah.
But identifying a mechanism to understand this entire universe, right? Because you might be having servers which are on-prem, on cloud. You might be having endpoint devices. You might be having mobile devices, right? I mean, test environment. So you have to first of all take a blank sheet of paper, sit down with the IT folks and the risk folks, and say, what will constitute our universe, right? So you have to start from somewhere. So one of the basic stuff is to start from your asset inventory, right? But
Mm,
then you need to expand that to your business world to see, where is my, because you might have SaaS applications, right? So first of all, you need to define those core areas, and then you need to sort of make people responsible to say, okay, if I have SaaS applications, who can give me a full list of SaaS applications or third-party applications? Uh, so I think start with asset inventory, but you need to do a sort of a blueprint on what your landscape can constitute of, right?
mm.
Devices, physical, virtual. You might have virtual, servers, virtual desktops, all of that. At least you need to put it down as your universe. Then only you
Yeah.
can really start on your, risk assessment phase.
Right. So is there a tracker or dashboard tool that can be created to adequately manage the issues that you highlighted? You were talking about matrices and all that, and ensure that there is visibility, transparency as to what is going on,
Yeah.
and timely remediation. So is there a tracker dashboard tool
So
can facilitate this?
I think uh, I think some of these GRC tools do come up
Right.
with those, but again, those are quite expensive. Uh, but I would suggest is again, if you look at the internet, also there is a lot of knowledge into it, right? But now, I think the more important thing is, based on your business, right? What type of metrics do you need to measure, right? Is very important. Now, for example, uh, if you take a SOC operation, right? Mean time to detect and mean time to remediate, right? MTT and MTTR, right? These are two items that, as a CISO, I'm very concerned about, right? And these are two metrics I actually take to the board as well. Right? So if you are really trying to implement a metric and a dashboard, right? What will happen is you will have once you start doing this, you will find countless number of metrics, right? Percentage of endpoints with DLP agents, percentage of endpoints with classification agents, right? Percentage of access reviews done, percentage, you can sort of build up, right? But then those will be most operational, right? And
Right.
some of those metrics will be owned by IT in most cases. And then out of that, you need to really pick and choose maybe about 10 to 15 metrics that you take it up to your senior management or your board, right? If you take 100 metrics to the board, right, you will lose them immediately, right? So that's not the game to play, right? You take about 5 to 10, which is the most critical in your organization, in your view, and you present that. But at an operational level, you can have a lot more.
Right. So just the final question, yeah, at 6:59. This is about, you have companies where their data are stolen, there's a breach, and sometimes you find this personal sensitive data appearing in the dark web. So companies kind of monitor all is the dark web to see whether any of their data has been shared. So we have a question on this. What precaution do you think a company can take in order to mitigate these risks? I suppose it's
Yeah, so I think it's a very loaded question because
very loaded.
a very
Yes,
loaded
yes.
question. So because at the end of the day, so your end objective is to ensure that your data doesn't go out, right? But then, so in security we call this defense in depth model, right? So you
What
have
model?
your defense in depth.
Okay.
So basically you have your data at the heart, right? So at data at rest, you can encrypt your data, right? Data in transit, you can encrypt, right? So you protect your data. Then on top of it, you will have your network layer, right? Then what type of, uh, you know, internal network controls do you have? Then your peripheral network controls, right? Your endpoint controls. So what you're doing is, for an attacker, if they come, you're making it difficult for it to actually come and get your data, right? So because if all else fails, right? Let's say if everything fails and he gets the data, if your data is encrypted, still that data means nothing to them, right? But
Yes.
in the same way, for example, uh, there's a tool called NDR, right? Network detection and response, right? Which not many companies have invested in. But if you have a tool like that, if there's an exfiltration happening, it can actually create alerts and actually inform you, right? So I think you need to have the sort of this the cyber hygiene and the control that we discussed. If you have all of those in place, I think you can sort of to a large extent say that something like that will not happen.
All right, Janet, I think with that we can conclude this session. Thank you very much. On behalf of ISACA Sri Lanka, I must thank you for accepting my invitation to take time off and make this presentation. So our next session, session 4, will be on the 6th of June from 6 to 7. The topic is how and what to be reported to top management and board of directors. I think Janidu touched on this, but Dilusha Karunaratna will further elaborate on that topic. So with that said, I would like to thank you once again, Janidu. On behalf of ISACA Sri Lanka, you've been a big support of us. You've been supporting CA Sri Lanka as well in the past, and now ISACA, and we look forward to inviting you for more sessions in the future. And thank you very much to all our participants who have joined us virtually. And we would like to request you to stay connected and follow the next few sessions as well. So with that, have a very good evening. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Ashim.
Ashwin, better we mentioned that for the some of the people have asked for CPD certificates and CPD arrangements. For
Right.
ISACA members, you may need to contact directly membership for that, and for the members of the CA Sri Lanka, you can get in touch with us through your IT faculty, Ms. Mahika. You can mention to her, and she will coordinate with our ISACA for those letters. So that's the arrangement currently we have made. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Indika, for sharing that. I think it's very important. At the end of the day, we need to collect our CPD as well. That's a compliance requirement. Janidu. All right. So thank you and have a good evening.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Cheers. Bye bye.